The myth goes like this. Zeus, Persephone's father, gave her to Hades as a wife. He took her to the underworld where she was to become his bride. Persephone's mother Demeter grew angry. She neglected the earth, her domain, and nothing grew. As this stretched on, Zeus asked Hades to return Persephone to her mother. Hades complied, but first he had Persephone eat a bit of pomegranate. The food of the underworld, once consumed, made it so that Persephone had to return to Hades for half of the year. My name is Wart, and this is Deus Ex Machina. Please note this story contains depictions of abduction, panic attacks, some violence, and mistreatment of a child. Listener discretion is advised. This train. I will have none of it. Her words, sharp and final, echo in the almost empty throne room as she turns to storm away, leaving Zeus alone on his throne. He stares at the door for a long while after, his fingers steepled before him, blue eyes dark and stormy. Thunder rumbles outside the windows, lightning flashes. A storm is brewing. Hades stands still and silent, gazing out at the underworld from his seat. He sees Cerberus, ever vigilant. He sees Asphodel and Elysium and the souls that dwell within. He sees the blackness of Tartarus and shudders at the thought of what is imprisoned in its deepest depths. He turns his gaze in the direction of the river Styx, but this he cannot see. It is shrouded in mist, neither part of the underworld nor the mortal. But Hades can feel it, knows it flows ever on, and Charon continues to ferry the souls of the dead from one shore to the other. This all is Hades' domain, his role in the turn of the world. Once he resented his brothers for his lot. He, the eldest, wished for Zeus's throne, but he has grown to respect his own position. This is his world, and his brothers have theirs. Still, sometimes, like now, Hades grows lonely. His fellow gods rarely visit, and he does not venture to Olympus as much as the others. He is frequently alone with only his thoughts, alone with only the dead. He senses Zeus before he enters the hall. Hades knows the feel of every soul, living, dead, immortal. So he has already turned from the window, dark eyes on the door, when Zeus enters, his bronze skin seeming to glow even in the dim room. "Brother," Hades greets, nodding his head, "what brings you so far from your skies?" Zeus strides forward, head high, blue eyes bright, fists clenched at his sides. He stops in front of Hades, holding his gaze. "I have a gift for you," he says, his voice a rumble deep in his chest. Hades can feel his anger, but he does not fear. Not here, so far from the open air. He only waits, patient, hands clasped before him, gaze unwavering. Zeus will continue in his own time. Zeus reaches into his robe and pulls out a small plate. He holds it out, and Hades takes it. There is a girl painted on it, a beautiful girl with curling black hair and light brown skin. She is surrounded by lilacs that match her eyes. "What is this?" Hades asks. "Your wife," Zeus answers simply. Hades gazes at the picture, afraid to ask more, unsure of what has brought this on. "It isn't the old days," he says finally. "Times have changed." "We have not," Zeus snaps, voice sharp and final. "We are as we have always been, and this," he nods at the plate, "is as it must always be." Hades longs to disagree, but he holds his tongue. It is useless to argue. They have all hashed out their feelings on this 100 times, but Zeus's word continues to be final. They are gods, unchanging and forever. Hades slips the plate into a pocket deep in his robes. Zeus nods like it is settled and turns, striding purposefully out of the hall. As he disappears, there is a rumble. Cerberus is growling, but to Hades it sounds much like thunder. Like a storm is brewing. He does not see her when he emerges from Hades' domain. She watches him, her anger hot and roiling. She longs to call out, begin the argument anew. But it will end as it always does. So she will wait, and she will fight in her own way. Above her head, a leaf turns quickly from green to red, then drops from its branch, floating on the soft spring breeze. The festival will soon begin, and Persephone cannot stay away. Mother told her to take care, but it is almost opening day, and the park is alive with lilacs, and Persephone longs to lose herself in their beauty, and she will, as she has every year before. She strides among the bushes in the night, greeting nymphs who also want to enjoy the flowers without the bustle of mortals. They will all be there when the festival officially opens, relishing the mortal attention, the appreciation of nature that keeps the nymphs and dryads alive in these modern times. A nymph strays close to Persephone, and she follows to the nearby tree, anticipating a night's enjoyment of more than just the sights and scents. The night is warm for May here. The moon hangs bright in the sky. The flowers are soft, their scent strong but not heavy. Persephone leans in and catches the nymph's lips with her own, tasting a giggle on her lips. She smiles at the feel of it, pressing her body against the nymph's, who presses back. A gentle spring breeze caresses their skin, cooling them even as they warm each other, the air rich with the scent of lilacs. But there is another smell, and Persephone pulls back as it fills her senses. The nymph has smelled it too. Her face screws up against it as she melts back into her tree, retreating from this foreign, unnatural scent. Persephone stumbles back from the tree, gagging on the stench, searching for its source. It is steam and burning coal hot in her nose and throat, and this, coupled with what she sees mere feet away, brings to mind her mother's warnings. In the middle of the park, a hole has opened up. Train tracks spiral down it, and a black steam engine is slowly emerging from it, grinding to a halt before Persephone. An impossible train, a black stain on this beautiful night, and Persephone knows it has come for her. As it lumbers to a halt, a door opens. A tall, thin figure steps out, black uniform disappearing against the train's flank, hat pulled down low to hide their face. The figure gestures for Persephone to enter. She hesitates, but when the warm smell of newly blooming flowers wafts through the open door to wash over her, she slowly moves forward, drawn by the beauty she longs to see. The figure bows to her as she crosses the threshold, then is gone as the door closes behind her, locking her in a greenhouse as impossible as the train. It is full of roses and tulips, morning glories and peonies. Flowers stretch from one end of the compartment to the other, and for a brief moment Persephone is content. Then the smell of coal again overwhelms her as the train begins to move, this time spiraling down into the earth, and Persephone cannot feel the sky or the open air, and panic rises quickly as she realizes she is trapped here. She turns to run back, to pound on the glass, to pull at the doors until they open for her. Futility does not matter. What matters is she is lost down here. She must get out. But there is nowhere to go. The doors are shut. Nothing beyond them but dark earth as the train travels deeper. And then, at the door between compartments, his head bowed, hands half hidden in the sleeves of a cloak matched only by his skin in its darkness, stands Hades, her uncle, her betrothed. I thought this would help, he says in his soft voice, raising his eyes to hers. They are as dark as his cloak and skin, irises almost shadows in the whites, but they do not frighten Persephone. Instead, she finds sadness there, but it does little to quell her anger, and it does not completely quell her fear. What would help, she demands, all her roiling emotions coming out in a harsh, choked shout. Hades nods as though he expected this, and Persephone's anger grows. But before she can shout and rage and demand to be let go, he raises his arms and holds his hands out, palms up, gesturing around them. This, he says. I thought this would help you ease the transition. He drops his hands to his sides, shakes his head. I should have known better. And at that, she breaks. Damn you, she shouts, as tears press hot and insistent at her eyes. She lunges forward, collides with Hades, and pounds at his chest. Take me back! Take me home! Hades doesn't move, just lets her beat at him, waits until she stops, her body slumping against him, fists clutching at his cloak, shoulders shaking with sobs. Then, slowly, gently, giving her the chance to pull away, he wraps his arms around her, holding her to him in a tentative hug. I can't, he says quietly. Zeus would take it as an insult if I declined his gift. She pulls away, pushes him hard so he stumbles back against the wall. Her eyes are bright, her tears done, sadness replaced by anger. I am not a gift, she growls out through clenched teeth. And even if I were, I am not his to give. Hades nods and opens his mouth to speak, but Persephone hurries on. You will turn this train around, and you will take me back. We are not in ancient times, uncle. Hades looks around him at the makeshift greenhouse, as though searching for answers among the flowers, among his peace offering, his bribe. I cannot take you back. Not yet, he says. But these are yours. This room is a part of my palace, and it is all yours. I will not bother you. He turns and quickly disappears through the door into the next compartment. Persephone stares after him. She does not see the flowers. She does not hear the train or feel the movement. She is trapped alone on a sinking island, her life, her autonomy, slipping away from her. The fact that she has been here before does not make it any easier. It never has. The train begins to slow, and Persephone collapses to the floor, legs pulled up tight to her chest, face pressed into her knees as tears well up again. She sits and she cries, wishing she could do something more than wallow. Hermes is in the engine, perched on the coal box, grinning like a child up to no good. His red skin glows eerily in the firelight. "Hello, Hades," he says. "I heard you had a guest." Hades glowers up at him. "What do you want?" he asks. "Not me," Hermes says, swinging his legs back and forth. "No, no, not I," said the fly. The wings on his shoes flutter and he jumps down to the floor. He strides up to Hades, standing on his tiptoes so their faces are inches apart. "A friend of ours," he says. "Says you have something of hers." "You know how this goes," Hades says, pulling away, looking away. Shame and anger and sadness all well up inside him once again, and he cannot meet Hermes' eyes. "Yes, yes, and Hades plays along. Good little boy, aren't you?" Hermes grins as Hades' eyes cut to him again. His eyes flash with mischief. "Is that your final answer?" Hades turns away again. "Typical," Hermes says. "Cautious Hades, always following his baby brother's rules." Anger flares like ice through Hades' veins, and he rounds on Hermes, but the messenger is gone. With a heavy sigh, Hades leans against the wall as the train slows, stops, returns to its usual shape as Hades' palace in the underworld. Around him, the engine becomes his main hall, and he slides down to sit on the cold stone floor. "What can I do?" he whispers, squeezing his eyes shut against hot tears of frustration. "What can I do?" "I'll let you guess," Hermes says. He's sitting in a tree, the leaves turning gold and red and brown around him, fluttering to the green grass below. "Come on," he wheedles. "You can get this one. It's an easy one." Demeter does not answer. She does not have to. Persephone loses track of time, sitting alone in a greenhouse in the underworld, surrounded by flowers that have never seen the light of day. She stopped crying, but she still feels the ache of loss, hollow in her gut. She has her eyes closed, filling her mind with images of the lilacs, but it isn't the same. Still curled up, she lies down, pressing her cheek against the cold stone floor. "Mother," she whispers in a hoarse voice. "Mother, take me home." Once, Hades would have... No. Was. He was once glad of the match because the cycle has happened before. And if Zeus continues to get his way, it will continue to happen. Over and over because gods never change. But Hades feels changed. Not just because his realm has changed, shifting and growing to accommodate the changes in the beliefs of mortals. Their views on life and death and gods have changed, and Hades is not surprised that he too has been altered by the passage of time. He is not like Zeus. He is not so worried about being forgotten, dismissed, or ignored. He is not fighting to maintain a status he has already lost. Now Hades does not see what he once did when he looks at Persephone. Once she was property. Zeus is to give, his to receive. She was a transaction. Now Hades sees the truth. She is barely more than a child, alone and afraid. He should send her home, but what would Zeus do then? What would become of the world if the cycle were broken? Hades, ruler of the underworld, keeper of the dead, is afraid to find out. When she finally gets up, Persephone is tired and thirsty. Her anger has given way to despair, for now, and all she wants to do is sleep, dream a dream that is better than reality. She stands still for a moment, dizzy and disoriented from getting up too fast. The muggy air of the greenhouse doesn't help, and she has to close her eyes and take a few deep, steadying breaths before she can figure out what to do next. She opens her eyes and looks out at the strange glow of the underworld. There is a garden there, full of plants Persephone has never seen before. They are beautiful and terrible, plants of the afterlife. She turns away from them, walking slowly and mechanically through the nearest door. She finds a bed there, a vanity, a pitcher of water, even a glass. She pours herself some and takes a long drink, then curls up on the bed, her back pressed to the cold stone wall. She watches the door for as long as she can keep her eyes open, but soon she drifts off to sleep, dreaming of flowers. "Zeus wants you." Demeter ignores him like the pest he is, keeps walking along the road, oblivious to the dying crops in the fields and the dark gray storm clouds above. Hermes, undeterred, continues. "He's called a meeting," he says. "We're supposed to discuss this." Again, Demeter says nothing. There is no more to say. She has made her position clear. Surprisingly, Hermes takes the hint and disappears. Once he is gone, Demeter stops, sits on a stone wall that runs parallel to the road. She looks out at the ruined farmland before her and lets her sorrow take hold. As tears run hot down her cheeks, the clouds open and it begins to snow. And the strange weather continues as another cold front moves in from the lake. Looks like another snowstorm tonight, folks. I guess Mother Nature doesn't want to do her spring cleaning either. The weatherman's tinny, too cheerful laughter is cut off as soon as it begins. Mia glances at her father in his chair. He looks older now, haggard and worn, when just days ago he was full of life and mirth. "It isn't funny, Mia," he says. Mia doesn't answer, just looks away. She knows. They all know. Joe and Peter have called every day since the frost, wanting to know how bad it is, what they can do to help. But they can't help. No one can. The crops are ruined, the livestock is sick, the farm isn't going to survive the season. Mia searches for something, anything to say, but there is nothing. There is no balm to ease her parents' suffering, no cure-all phrase to set her family right. Instead, she turns her gaze to the window and watches with a heavy heart as the snow begins to fall. And she gasps. There's a crumbling stone wall along the drive. It's been there for generations, a fixture of their land. Now a woman sits upon it in nothing save a skirt and blouse. For an instant, Mia thinks it's her mother, same deep brown skin, same long black hair. But her mother is in with the baby, trying to get him to sleep. "Papa?" Mia whispers, but it comes out barely audible as the woman turns and fixes a heavy stare on the window, as though she has sensed Mia looking. And before Mia knows what she's doing, she's up and moving, walking slowly to the front door, drawn by the stranger's gaze. She opens the door, and the woman is there already, impossibly. "Come in," Mia says. "It's cold out there." The woman steps past Mia into the farmhouse, and like a distant call, Mia hears baby Carlos begin to cry. Hades watches her, staying distant. They dine together, but the meals are short and silent. Persephone has lost something, being so deep, so far from the sun. Hades cannot remember the point of the cycle because it all feels so wrong to him now. He does not recall what depriving this beautiful young woman of her liveliness and youth is supposed to accomplish. What was Zeus thinking? And what can Hades do? For Persephone, the garden becomes a haven, a safety net. The flowers are strangers, the fruits alien to her, so she spends her days tending them, getting to know them. She's trying to make a home of this prison, trying to gild her cage in the hopes that she will cease to see the bars. "She will not come." Hermes' announcement is greeted with a heavy silence as the gathering of gods turns their attention to Zeus, their king. "She dares disobey the summons of Zeus, king of the gods?" Hermes rolls his eyes and leans back on his throne. "What did you expect, O kingly one?" he asks, raising his eyebrows. "You sold her daughter to your brother for no good reason." "It is as it has been done," Zeus roars out, standing, fists clenched as he glares across at Hermes. "It is how it must be done." "Why?" Hera asks. Her voice is quiet, but it still draws attention, even that of her husband. He fumes still, but he turns to her. She looks up at him, her pure white skin ghostly in the bright light of Olympus. "Why must it be done, husband? Times have changed." "But we have not," Zeus answers. "We will not. We cannot." "But why?" Hera's question hangs over the gathering of gods as Zeus struggles visibly to find an answer. "Because if we change," he finally says, "if we change, we will not be gods anymore. Ourselves are wrapped up in our ways, in our cycles. We will lose ourselves if we lose that." "I want to thank you," Persephone says, breaking the heavy silence that always hangs between them at mealtimes. Hades looks up, eyebrow cocked in question. Persephone takes a sip of her water, buying herself a little time. She swallows and meets his eyes, speaking before her courage fails her. "Thank you for trying to make this easier on me, and for not doing anything that..." She trails off, not sure how to phrase it, how to say it without blushing and mortifying herself. Hades blows out a soft sigh. "I'm only sorry I can't do more," he says, "and that it doesn't truly help." "But the effort," Persephone says. "I appreciate that." She stands, setting her napkin down on her still half-full plate. She has not had much of an appetite lately. She bows her head to him and walks purposefully out into the greenhouse. Her home, or what little she has of one now. Hades watches her go, then looks down at his own barely touched plate of food. He studies the little pile of pomegranate seeds he's been pushing around with his fork. He always has pomegranates at dinner, though he cannot remember how it started or why. He thinks it was during another cycle, the Persephone of that time mentioning that she liked them and his memory latching onto it, a sad attempt to make her more comfortable. He looks over at her plate and sees that her own pomegranate seeds are the only thing she has eaten in entirety. He smiles at the sight, his heart heavy as he makes a decision. It is Mia who finds her. She is sitting by the fire, rocking in the chair, watching the flames. At first, Mia thinks she is rocking Carlos to sleep, but then she sees it, tucked into the flames, a bundle of blankets. She screams, and her mother and father come running, and it is chaos and anger as her mother risks burns to pull him from the flames. The woman stands, calm and quiet, and walks out, the door closing with a soft click on her final words to them. He would have been so strong. It takes all of Hades' willpower to go through with it. He is afraid of what it will do, of what will become of the gods if he breaks the cycle, of how Zeus will react. But stronger than his fear is the pain he sees in Persephone's eyes every day, the silent accusation that hangs between them. Around him, his palace shifts back into a train and slowly begins the long ascent to the mortal world. "Naughty boy," Hermes says, appearing beside Hades. "Naughty, naughty." "There is no point to this," Hades says. "There hasn't been a point to it for centuries, yet we continue. What's next, the Trojan War? What's the use?" "Not to be forgotten," Hermes says, but it's obvious he's just parroting Zeus's words. Hades shakes his head. "You know as well as I we have not been forgotten and are unlikely to be," he says. "Look at how they study the past, how they romanticize us, or demonize us." He meets Hermes' golden gaze. "We have not been forgotten. But we have been altered," Hermes says. And Hades can't tell if he's arguing for the sake of it or if he really has started to agree with Zeus. "We have been so changed, Hades. Are you not afraid of ceasing to be yourself?" Hades shakes his head. "I have changed faster than the rest of you," he says. "And have I truly changed at all? Death remains the same wherever the souls are believed to go." "That is well for you," Hermes says in a quiet voice, staring out of the train's front window at the dark rock they drive through. "But what about the rest of us? What are we supposed to do?" Hades lays a gentle hand on Hermes' shoulder and gives it a soft squeeze. "Adapt," he says, his voice hushed. A moment later, his hand rests on air. Hermes is gone. "He dares defy me?" Zeus's shout echoes through Mount Olympus. He stands to his full godly height, glaring down at Hermes, who stands before him, not even the slightest bit cowed by this show of power and anger. "Did you ever think," Hermes muses, gazing up at Zeus, tone almost disinterested, bored, "did you ever stop and think that maybe, just maybe, it's all this clinging on to the old ways that will destroy you?" He won't let on that he hadn't considered it himself until his last conversation with Hades, but it has been on his mind since. Death has changed so much over the centuries, yet Hades still thrives. Why can't it be the same for the rest of them? He knows he's changed, remembers a time when Asclepius was separate from him, but now they have merged somewhat thanks to mortals. Yet still they both exist. It isn't that he doesn't fear being forgotten. He does. He fears being so changed he will no longer recognize himself too. He understands Zeus in this, but he also recognizes that Zeus's tactics to remain relevant haven't worked before now and are unlikely to start. Zeus, stubborn and hard-headed, needs something he cannot ignore to convince him, and perhaps that's exactly what Hades is giving them. Hermes leaves Zeus before the king of the gods can take out his anger on him, leaves him to storm, his lightning and thunder mingling with the snow that is still falling in the mortal realm, confusing all those humans who are scared enough already. As Hermes dodges the bright bolts, he muses that perhaps this will be the last cycle. But will Zeus coming to his senses mark the end of the age? Or will the mortals finally cast them aside? They won't know until the end, and as Hermes flies towards a shadowy train, he figures there's no use worrying about it. He's angry. I know. If you break the surface, he will come for you. Let him. Hades glances back at the door that leads from the engine to the rest of the train. As long as Persephone is all right, he can do what he likes to me. Bold. Hermes lounges on the pile of coal and studies the dark face of the god of the dead. "Well," he says after a moment, suddenly cheerful, "best of luck to you." He disappears and Hades sighs, resigned to the lonely ride up to the mortal realm. "Thank you." The soft voice startles him and he turns quickly. Persephone stands in the doorway, a cloth over her nose and mouth to keep the coal dust at bay. She has tucked a lily behind her ear, the white bloom bright against her dark hair. Hades swallows hard, forces his voice to work. He was never one for conversation, and Persephone makes him feel more keenly aware of this shortcoming. I'm sorry I was too cowardly to do this before, he says. You're old, she says, lets out a light chuckle when he bristles. Older than I am, anyway. I know it's hard to let go of. The train jolts to a halt and Persephone falls back against the wall, her startled cry cut off by the breath being knocked from her. Are you all right? Hades asks, goes to rush forward, but the engine breaks in two with a crack of thunder, and a large hand reaches down and plucks him from his palace. Snow falls steadily onto Persephone's prone form, slowly covering her. They reach Mount Olympus in a moment. Zeus sets Hades in the throne room before he returns to a mortal height. His rage doesn't dissipate with his size, and the sky cracks and bellows with it. How dare you undermine me, Zeus shouts, crowding into Hades' space. I am your king. You're also my brother, and you are being a fool. Hades is calm. He crosses his arms over his chest and raises his eyebrows, watching Zeus seethe. Times change. We must change with them or risk being lost. You're wrong. You don't understand. The underworld is too far from what is really going on. You cannot understand. Zeus seems so small now, though his mortal height is the same as Hades. His terror seems to shrink him. And Hades might pity him if his grasping at the old ways didn't hurt others. Brother, Hades says, voice calm. Brother, look. He guides Zeus to the edge of the room and points down at the mortal realm, at a broken train, at Demeter's form approaching her daughter. There are better ways. There must be better ways. Down below, Demeter trudges through the snow towards the train. She can feel Hades' power on it, the taint of something not of the earth. She won't let herself hope that he's come to his senses, that he's brought her daughter home, but she has to see. The engine has been broken, torn from the rest of the train. The floor is covered in snow, and at first Demeter thinks that's all she'll find, until a figure shifts, groans. Demeter rushes forward, falling to her knees and brushing the snow aside, gasping out a sob at the sight of her daughter. Hades turns from the sight, drawing Zeus back to the throne room with him, giving Demeter and Persephone their privacy. Do you see, brother? Hades asks. It doesn't have to be the same to continue. We are capable of change. Zeus looks at him, shakes his head, and leads him to another vantage point at the room's edge. Are we? He asks, gesturing out. Hades looks down at a mortal family gathered around a crib, crying, worried. The child inside stirs and tearful gasps and terrified laughs fill the nursery. Hades furrows his brow. She still does this? He asks, quiet. Did she? She was interrupted. Zeus turns and paces back to the center of the throne room. I made sure of that. We don't need more immortals. Hades watches his brother for a moment, considering. Did you ever think, he says, that perhaps she tries to bless a mortal because you keep shipping her daughter off to the underworld? She is meant to be your wife. Zeus rounds on him, growing as he stalks towards him. That is the way it has been, and the way it will always be. Wives are not transactions now, Hades counters, nor should they ever have been. The mortals are learning. Why can we not learn too? We don't learn, Zeus shouts. The sky breaks with thunder and lightning. We are gods. We are what they make us, Hades says, gesturing towards the earth below. Cling all you want, brother, but you are changing. We all are. And we must, or risk losing ourselves. He turns and walks on out of the room, away from Olympus. He feels the prickle of electricity in the air. Knows Zeus won't let this go, but there's nothing else to say. They've been over it again and again, trying to find a place in this ever-changing world. Zeus, always hard-headed and stubborn, has gotten worse, as if becoming more of what he was can prevent him from becoming something new. There's no arguing with that. The only thing they can do is prove that change won't destroy them, and Hades hopes that's exactly what he's doing. Mia sits at the window, Carlos sleeping in her arms. She watches the snow melt in the fields, her heart heavy. It's too little, too late. They've lost valuable planting time, and what they did get in the ground is likely dead now. She doesn't know what's going to happen, but she knows it'll be a long, hard year. She almost doesn't see the women. They blend with the trees for a moment, and she thinks it's just her tears welling up in her eyes. But then they move. Walking across the field, the snow melts faster where they pass, disappearing entirely. What? Mia whispers, leaning closer to the window, trying to see. She recognizes the taller woman and instinctively holds Carlos a little tighter, remembering that night, the terror. The woman turns her head, looks directly at Mia. It's impossible the woman can see her, not from that distance, but she feels like those eyes are locked on her. Carlos stirs and whimpers, drawing Mia's attention from the window. When she looks again, the fields are clear of snow, the sun is high and bright, and the women are gone. Hades stands at the door to the greenhouse, smiling softly to himself as he watches Persephone tend the plants. "We don't get these," she says, pointing to a soft red flower. It glows a little in the dim light. "What's it called?" "Soulfire," Hades answers. "It's late October in the mortal world, but the seasons don't change down below, save for Persephone. Once she was forced to make the trip, pulled by a connection built with pomegranate seeds. He remembers now. But now she comes willingly, to visit. The seasons change above, and Hades can track them down below. The weather turns cold for the mortals, but a warm ray of light falls on the underworld. Things have changed. Things have stayed the same. And the gods go on." Deus Ex Machina is written and performed by Wart Hill. If you have any questions or any myths you'd like to hear me take on, find me on Twitter at DeusExPod or send an email to deusexpod@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.